All right, let's jump right in, ready for a deep dive into Micah, chapters 1 through 3.
Sounds good.
This prophet, he really doesn't hold back, does he?
Not at all.
Throws down some hard truths about Judah and Israel, about their corruption, their oppression.
Yeah, talk about injustice.
It's amazing how these themes, centuries later, they still resonate with us today.
I think that's what makes studying the prophets so fascinating.
Right. It's like he's speaking directly to our own society.
Exactly. It's like Mike is holding up a mirror.
It's almost unnerving how relevant his message feels. And Micah doesn't just pronounce doom and gloom. He points towards a future leader coming from a really unexpected place, Bethlehem.
Right.
Can you tell us more about that?
Well, Micah was writing at a time when both the northern kingdom, Israel, and the southern kingdom, Judah, were facing a lot of turmoil. They had turned away from God, and their leaders were exploiting the very people that they were supposed to protect.
So what does Micah do? He doesn't hold back. Chapter 1 starts with some pretty intense imagery. Mountains melting, valleys splitting.
Right.
It feels almost apocalyptic.
Yeah.
What is Micah trying to convey here?
Well, imagine if you were going to illustrate just how immense God's reaction to the state of things is. How would you do it? I mean, Micah uses these powerful metaphors, mountains melting, valleys splitting, to show just how deeply God is grieved by all of the sin, by how pervasive it is.
Wow.
It's a stark wake-up call, a reminder that what we do has consequences not just for ourselves, but for our communities and the world around us.
That's a challenging thought, isn't it? It really makes you think about the impact of our choices, whether our choices are uplifting others or if they're contributing to the problems.
Yeah.
And Micah doesn't stop at simply pointing out the problems. He introduces this idea of the remnant.
Yeah.
Now, imagine living in ancient Judah. You're surrounded by all this corruption and injustice. Would you be part of that faithful few, that remnant that Micah describes? I mean, what choices would you make to stand out from that?
It's a really important question to consider.
Yeah.
Micah is offering this glimmer of hope. He's reminding us that even in the darkest times, God preserves a faithful group who remain true to him.
So Micah paints this pretty bleak picture of the state of things, but he offers this thread of hope with the remnant. And then he dives into the leadership, right?
Yeah, he does.
In chapter 2, he really goes after the leaders of Judah.
He does. He calls them out for taking advantage of the vulnerable, seizing land, homes, preying on those who can't fight back.
It makes you wonder, are we using our own influence to uplift others or to exploit them?
That's right.
I mean, are we part of the problem?
Yeah.
Or are we part of that faithful remnant?
Right. It's a question each of us has to ask ourselves.
Wow. That's a powerful question to consider. It really personalizes Micah's message. He's not talking about some, abstract concept of justice. He's challenging us to look at our own lives and our own choices.
Yeah, and to remember that God sees it all.
Right, yeah. There's no escaping his awareness.
It's not just about our personal actions. It's about leadership on all levels.
Exactly. Micah emphasizes that we're all called to live with integrity, no matter what our position is or how much power we have, because, we all have influence in our families, our workplaces, our communities.
And then in chapter 3, Micah really zeroes in on this failure of leadership.
Yeah.
We're talking prophets, priests, officials. These were the people that were entrusted to guide the nation.
The people that everyone looked up to.
Right.
Supposed to be the moral compass.
And yet they're leading them astray for their own personal gain.
Leading them astray and lining their own pockets at the same time.
And you mentioned earlier that Micah hints at a future leader who would embody true justice.
Right.
It's interesting to contrast these corrupt leaders with the vision that Micah is pointing us toward.
It really is.
Micah himself stands as this stark contrast to these figures.
He does.
He declares, "But as for me, I am filled with power, with the Spirit of the Lord." Wow, what a statement.
He embodies authentic, spirit-empowered leadership, which was a model I think sorely needed then, and I would argue even more relevant now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what does spirit-empowered leadership actually look like in practice? I mean, can you give us an example from Micah's life or even from today?
Well, Micah speaks truth to power even when it's dangerous, and he isn't afraid to call out injustice and challenge those in authority. And he puts the needs of the people above his own even when it costs him personally. I mean, that's what sets him apart from the corrupt leaders of his day.
That's a powerful example.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the leaders that we see today, in government, in our communities, even in our own families.
Right.
Are we leading with God's wisdom?
Hmm.
Are we prioritizing justice and humility?
Yeah.
Or are we driven by selfish ambition?
It's a question each of us needs to grapple with.
We've explored Micah's powerful indictment of Judah's leadership
Yeah.
and, the deep-seated injustice in their society. It's a sobering reminder that even those in positions of power, they can stray from God's path.
They can, and they do, unfortunately.
Micah doesn't just leave us hanging in despair, though.
No, not at all. I mean, there's this thread of hope that's woven throughout these pronouncements of judgment. Micah doesn't just point out the problems.
Right.
He offers a path forward, a way back to alignment with God's will.
So what does that path look like? I mean, how do we move from, judgment to restoration,
Right.
from corruption to true, authentic leadership?
Well, one of the key themes that emerges from Micah is this importance of aligning our actions with God's heart for justice.
No.
Micah contrasts the corrupt leaders of his day with this vision of leadership
Right.
that's rooted in righteousness, humility, and a deep concern for the well-being of the people.
You mentioned earlier that Micah himself serves as an example of this kind of spirit-empowered leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Can you unpack that a bit more? What made his leadership different?
Well, Micah was filled with the Spirit of the Lord. Right.
And that empowered him to speak truth to power even when it was dangerous.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid to call out injustice, challenge those in authority.
Sure.
He put the needs of the people above his own, even when it cost him personally.
That's a powerful example. It really highlights that contrast
It does.
between true leadership and the self-serving leadership that Micah condemns.
Right.
But it's not just about, those in official leadership roles, is it?
No.
Micah seems to be challenging everyone to examine their own lives and actions.
That's a crucial point, yeah. Micah's message isn't just for kings and priests.
Right.
It's a call to action, for every single person.
Mm.
He reminds us that we all have a role to play in upholding righteousness and resisting oppression.
Yeah.
We may not all hold official positions of leadership, but we all have influence in our own spheres of life.
So it's not about waiting for the perfect leader to come along and fix everything.
Right. It's about taking responsibility for our own actions and making choices that, align with God's principles.
That's right.
And using our influence, however big or small it is, to make a difference.
Precisely. Micah's urging us to be those agents of change,
Mm-hmm.
to stand up for what's right, to
Yeah.
work toward a more just and equitable world.
Yeah.
It's about examining our own hearts,
Mhm.
asking ourselves, am I living out the values that I claim to uphold?
That can be a tough question to answer, honestly.
Yeah, I can.
It's so much easier to just, focus on the flaws of others than to confront our own shortcomings.
Absolutely.
But Micah doesn't let us off the hook that easily.
Well, it doesn't.
He challenges us to, move beyond superficial piety,
Yeah.
embrace a faith that's deeply rooted in justice, mercy, compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the connection to the New Testament becomes so clear.
Right.
Remember, Micah prophesied about a righteous leader coming from Bethlehem.
That's right.
Ah, yes, the connection to Jesus. I'm eager to hear you expand on that.
Okay.
How does Micah's prophecy point us toward Jesus?
Well, Micah's vision of this righteous leader arising from Bethlehem ultimately points us toward Jesus Christ,
Right.
He is the one who perfectly embodies the qualities of leadership that Micah longed to see.
Yeah.
Justice, righteousness, humility, and a deep love for the people.
Micah's prophecy, it's almost like a bridge
It is.
between the Old and New Testaments,
Yeah.
highlighting that continuity of God's plan for humanity
Yeah.
and the unwavering nature of his character.
Exactly.
So even amidst, these pronouncements of judgment, there's this glimmer of hope, this promise of redemption.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like Micah saying, yes, things are bad, but don't lose heart. God is still at work.
Yeah.
He's going to do something amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a message that I think continues to resonate with us today.
Absolutely. Micah's words challenge us to live lives of integrity,
Yep.
to stand up for the vulnerable, to strive for justice in all that we do, He reminds us that even in the darkest of times, God is at work,
Right.
drawing us toward himself, shaping us into the people that he created us to be.
Well, we've journeyed through Micah's pronouncements of judgment,
Yeah.
explored those failures of leadership,
Right.
and uncovered that glimmer of hope, in the promise of a righteous leader.
Mm-hmm.
It's a powerful reminder that God's heart for justice never fades,
Whenever.
even in the face of human corruption and rebellion.
You know what strikes me is just how relevant Micah's message still is.
Yeah.
I mean, we might be centuries removed from ancient Judah,
Right.
but his words, they feel so timely. Micah's holding up a mirror to our own society, you know, forcing us to confront the ways that we fall short of God's standards.
It's like he's reading the headlines, isn't it?
It really is.
Greed, exploitation, corruption, the very issues that Micah condemned centuries ago. They're still plaguing us today.
They are, and that's why we can't just, read Micah's words as ancient history.
Right.
He's issuing a call to action, for each of us. We're called to be agents of change, to stand up for the vulnerable, and to work tirelessly for a more just and equitable world.
It can feel daunting, though, can't it?
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the sheer magnitude of the problems that we face today,
It can.
it's easy to just feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like, what difference can one person really make?
Well, Micah reminds us that we're not alone in this fight, We have the power of the Holy Spirit working within us, empowering us to make a difference, Even in small ways. Think about Micah himself, just one man speaking out against this corrupt system. But his words, they had a profound impact. They echoed through the centuries and ultimately pointed toward the coming of Jesus, the ultimate agent of change.
So it's not about, single-handedly trying to solve all the world's problems.
Right.
It's about those everyday choices.
Yeah.
Those small acts of courage and compassion that reflect God's values. Justice, mercy, and love.
Exactly. It's about choosing integrity over expediency, speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves.
Well,
using our influence, however big or small it is, to bring light into the darkness.
yeah.
It might be something as simple as challenging a prejudiced comment or volunteering at a local soup kitchen. Every act of justice, every step toward righteousness, it all makes a difference.
And those small acts, multiplied across countless individuals.
Right.
It can transform the world.
It really can.
Micah's prophecy, points us toward this vision of hope and restoration. It reminds us that God is still at work, weaving together his redemptive plan.
Micah's words, they challenge us to examine our own lives and ask, are we embodying God's justice and mercy? Are we standing up for what's right even when it's hard? Are we working toward a world that reflects God's heart for all people?
Those are powerful questions.
They are.
And they really stay with you. Long after you finish reading Micah, his prophecy, it doesn't offer any easy answers or quick fixes.
Right.
But it does offer hope.
Yeah.
Hope that God is at work. Hope that we can be a part of his redemptive plan, and hope that even in the midst of darkness, light will prevail.
That's the beauty of Micah's message.
Right.
It's this call to action, this challenge to live lives of purpose and meaning.
Right.
Lives that reflect the heart of God.
As we close our deep dive into Micah chapters 1 through 3, I want to encourage you to hold on to this truth.
Okay.
Even small acts of justice and mercy can make a world of difference.
Yeah, that's so important to remember.
So keep seeking those opportunities to be a light in the darkness, to be an agent of change, in your own sphere of influence.
Micah's prophecy may have been written centuries ago, but its message, it's timeless.
It is.
It speaks to the deepest longings of the human heart.
Yeah.
Longing for justice, for righteousness, for a world where God's love reigns supreme.
So keep diving deep, keep exploring God's word, and keep asking those tough questions, because it's in those questions.
Right.
And in our pursuit of the answers that we discover the true meaning and purpose of our lives.